to Scott Fox After 9. Today's going to be an interesting episode. Donald Trump did it. I guess taco doesn't really apply anymore. Trump always chickens out. Taco. He didn't chicken out this time. Bombed Iran on Saturday night. We're going to be talking about that pretty much exclusively in this episode of Scott Fox After 9. So what I found here is that this happened on a Saturday. A lot of people weren't paying attention. Big, massive heat wave gripping North America right now. Most parts of it anyway. It is feeling like 45 degrees Celsius in southern Ontario today. People had other things going on, and I think there's a lot of people that have heard a little bit about this attack on Iran, but not all of it. So in this episode, this is a historic thing. So I'm going to try and give you everything you need to know about what happened on Saturday and where we go from here. There's now reports that sleeper cells in North America, I mean America and Canada, are going to be activated. There's terror threats. There's all sorts of different balls up in the air right now. And it all links back to what happened when Israel bombed Iran and now America has kinda bombed Iran. I don't really want to say bombed Iran because they did bomb only 3 targets. No civilians hurt or injured, and not even any military targets hit outside of those 3 nuclear facilities. So this episode, let's get right into it. Let's talk about what happened on Saturday. If you want to know about the Iranian bombing, you're going to want to stick around for this episode. Ready? Let's do this. I'm going to start off with the announcement from President Trump on Saturday night.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow. President Donald Trump delivering one of those epic, iconic President of the United States White House moments where he announces that he has sent America's armed forces into harm's way. It really is remarkable how the U.S. pulled this off. Coming up in just a second, I've got an Air Force general who's going to explain exactly how this went down. Really interesting stuff. Very closely mirroring the plot of Top Gun Maverick. If I'm being honest, it basically was the plot of Top Gun Maverick. They had to drop one bomb and then drop another bomb in the hole from the first bomb in order to get down into these 3 nuclear sites, which are embedded into the side of a mountain. Iran did a lot of work to try and keep these sites secure, but it remains to be seen how much damage actually got done by this U.S. strike. Some of the aerial photographs don't indicate much damage at all. But would we know if there was a lot of damage underground without cameras down there? That remains to be seen. I think probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. I don't know that it was a spectacular success like President Trump suggested, because the uranium that the Iranians may have been using to create a nuclear weapon was likely moved out of that underground facility before this bombing took place. But make no mistake about it, Iran did not see this coming. Nobody saw this coming. There were no leaks on this one. No leaks at all. And I think that's because the White House kept a very small circle around who they were going to inform about this attack and that it was underway. With that in mind, let's go to the Pentagon. This is Air Force General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He, along with the Defense Secretary, held a news conference to explain exactly how the U.S. pulled this off.
This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of a plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications.
I want to pause it right there and summarize what you just heard. This was pretty impressive. If you were following along on X, or one of the better social media platforms, on Saturday, you may have seen people posting things about B-2 bombers in the air. They're heading for Diego Garcia. They're heading toward Guam. They're heading out over the Pacific. That was interesting because no doubt the Iranians probably saw that as well. They thought that if there was an attack coming, that was the bomber set that was going to do it. The ones going over the Pacific, they would have come up into Iran, dropped their bombs, and carried on east, likely to, I don't know, Israel? Is that where they would have landed? Jordan? I'm not sure. That's what they wanted the Iranians to think. Now, while everybody was focused on those bombers that were going out over the U.S. West, there was actually a strike group of 7 B-2 bombers and aerial refueling planes that were taking off quietly, and they were heading east. It was a great distraction. Nobody in Iran saw this coming. They thought if the attack was coming, it was coming from their east, the planes that headed west out of America. It was nothing like that. Those were just decoys. That's some pretty advanced planning. I mean, however you feel about this attack, you got to give the U.S. credit. This was very, very well thought out. Here's more of that report.
Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the fourth and fifth generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command.
I mean, this is a pretty intricate operation. What the chairman of the Joint Chiefs here is describing is something that took an incredible amount of planning. And you know, it seems like decoys was the name of the game. Not only did you have decoys out there trying to throw off the Iranian defenses, you also had Trump himself saying, well, we'll make a decision in the next 2 weeks or so. He knew full well Saturday was going to be the day. He knew this past Saturday was going to be the day those bombs were getting dropped. Now, one of the things that I didn't know is that there were submarines involved. This is really a showcase of the power of the U.S. military. They've got these B-2 bombers in the air, completely undetectable by radar. They can fly low, they can fly fast. In fact, you can't even hear them coming. You don't know they're coming until they're already over you. It's pretty impressive stuff. These bombers were in the air. They had a mission to do, but they were being supported by subs. So I don't know what the Iranian Navy is like, but these U.S. subs, they've got missiles that can fire a long distance. This sub just resurfaced, fired off a whole bunch of Tomahawk missiles, and then dove back down. I mean, if you're Iran, how do you defend against something like that? It's pretty wild. Let's get back to this briefing because I find this whole thing very, very fascinating.
As the strike package approached Fordow and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in.
Think about that for just a second. This attack was so well planned and so stealthy, Iran didn't even get a shot off. They didn't even have a chance to fire back. By the time they realized what was going on, those 3 underground nuclear sites had already been hit, and those bombers were already on their way back to America. And how about those B-2s? I mean, they reminds me of toys I used to play with as a kid, but these are the real life version. They were in the air for 36 hours? They had to refuel multiple times. They were carrying a payload of bombs that are 30,000 pounds each. It's incredible the thing could get off the ground, let alone fly that long without coming back down to the ground. They took off from America, went all the way over to Iran, and came all the way back to America without landing. Very, very impressive stuff, purely from a military standpoint. I mean, that's next level. You can tell I'm real excited about the technology involved here, can't you? I don't want you to mistake this for me approving of what's gone on here in any way. Please do not think that, because I don't approve of it. I was one of those people saying, don't do it, Trump. In fact, I'm still not sure how I feel now that he's actually done it, but I'm leaning towards maybe we should have given diplomacy a bit more of a chance here. But let's get back to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11.
I mean, listening to that, it seems like the U.S. military is exactly as advertised. They are strategic, they've got an unbelievable amount of firepower, and there's really no end of the earth they can't reach fairly easily. The amount of planning that went into this was next level, which leads me to believe that while the U.S. President, Donald Trump, was out talking about diplomacy, plans for this attack were well underway. I don't know if the Iranians anticipated it. I don't know if Iran thought Donald Trump would have the guts to actually do it. But he did. So here's the first time I'm going to ask you in this podcast. How are you feeling? Are you anxious? Are you nervous? Are you feeling patriotic? Are you ashamed that this happened? Are you angry? I'd like to know how you're feeling right now after this attack, because I am still trying to get my own assessment together. I still don't know how I feel about this. This is something that's been a threat since I was a kid, and probably much longer than that. I remember hearing about stuff like this when I was a kid. I remember watching 60 Minutes growing up because it was on and my parents loved it. And they were talking then about tensions with Iran. Are the tensions over now? That's what I'd like to know. Is this done? Is it up to Iran to decide if it's done, or will the Americans decide if this is done? I don't know. The U.S. says they had a goal to take out Iran's nuclear weapon making capability. And they say Iran was hell-bent on making themselves nuclear weapons. The U.S. says they've degraded that. They won't be able to do it anytime soon. If they even try again at all, that's it. They're done. And as long as there's peace, the U.S. will stay out of it from now on. Or will they? And what gave the U.S. the right to do this? This was Israel's conflict with Iran. I know the U.S. does not like Iran, and I know they do not want Iran to have nuclear weapons, partially because of what Donald Trump said in his address that you heard earlier. Iran is the world's biggest state sponsor of terror. Now, I don't have any actual facts to back that up, but I am going to trust the U.S.'s assessment there because I have no reason to disagree with them. Again, this is something I've been hearing about since I was a kid, but I never thought it would come to this. I never thought I'd see the day that the U.S. was dropping bombs on Iran. Iraq kind of saw that one coming. We all saw that one coming. Iran, though, why would they want to fire up a conflict with Iran? Is it all just because of the nuclear weapons? The U.S. said initially this wasn't about replacing the Iranian regime with a new government. They said they only wanted the nukes and then they were going to be out of there, and then it was back to an Israel-Iran conflict as long as Iran didn't escalate it by firing at the Americans or American allies. Okay, fine. Do you think this is over as far as Iran is concerned? They took a pretty big lump. Saturday night, that was a shock. They didn't see that coming. Do you think they're done? Do you think they want more of it? Do you think they're going to provoke more conflict? Is something like this enough to force a country into submission and accept a peace deal? Or is this going to inflame tensions even more? That's what I'm really not sure about, and that's what I'm really worried about. So again, the question I'm leaving you with is, how are you feeling? Let's get to more of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the president and the secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the president, the secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this.
Okay, obviously a very competent and experienced individual there. That is General Dan Kane of the U.S. Air Force. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now let's go to the diplomats. Let's go to the politicians and find out what they're saying about this. Because again, my goal in this episode is, number one, to place a major piece of history into a time capsule. This podcast, once it's out, it's out. And that'll be a good record of exactly how we're feeling just a couple of days after this attack by the U.S. on Iran. How are the politicians spinning this? I want to go to an interview that happened yesterday with the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He did several interviews. I'm going to play this clip here from him on Fox News, trying to explain the American position. Listen to this.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Are we now at war with Iran?
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter, and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. And, the president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what he wanted, then I'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us, privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for, their own public relations purpose.
Well, that's an interesting development because, there have been some countries that have been critical of America's attack on Iran. What do you think of what Secretary Rubio had to say there? This was up to the Iranians. He's basically saying Iran brought this on themselves because Iran refused to negotiate. Trump made the decision. You're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're just not going to have them. And you've got 60 days to work out a peace deal or else. Iran knew the stakes. Iran continued to not work out a deal. Now, what were the stakes for this deal? I don't know. I don't know if any of us will ever know the true extent of what was on the negotiating table. But what I do know is that that was an ultimatum. They were basically being told, you will never have a nuclear weapon. One of the things that I've never understood, and this is just me personally, it's not an editorial comment, it's an honest admission that I don't understand. What gives one country a right to decide that another country cannot have nuclear weapons? The Americans have nukes. The Russians have nukes. The UK, France, Germany, they've all got nukes. We don't have any here in Canada. So I don't know, maybe does that give us a higher ground to stand on, or are we just not part of the conversation because we don't have nuclear weapons? Well, those countries that do have decided the countries that shouldn't. And in this case, it's come to an ultimatum from America to Iran. You will not have nuclear weapons. And if you continue to pursue nuclear weapons, we'll just take out your nuclear weapon making capability. Is that fair? Is that right? You know, there's really no global police. There's really no global court. If this were a civil matter, we could go to court and say, hey, listen, these people here are bad actors, and we think it's dangerous to the world if they have nuclear weapons because they are so into using proxies for terror attacks. Iran's probably not going to fire a nuclear missile at Israel, but they might supply it to one of the terror groups that they work with and have them bring it into Israel, bring it into America, bring it into the UK, and so on and so forth. There's no global body that's going to make a decision and say, you're allowed to have them and you're not. Basically, it's the haves deciding the who else's. And if you're not on the list, you're not allowed to have nuclear weapons. That's not a judgment on my part. It's just an observation that I think it's a little weird that the countries that already have nuclear weapons are determining who else can and cannot have them. In the case of Iran, that might be a tricky one because of their ties to terror groups. Let's get to a little bit more of Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Have you heard from anyone in Iran, and are you expecting retaliation?
Well, if they retaliate, it'll be the worst mistake they've ever made. Look, we can fly in and out of Iran at will. We went in last night. The president sent our military forces from halfway across the world, went in, conducted this operation, left. Not a shot was fired against us. They didn't even know what had happened. By the time we left, the planes were out of their airspace before they finally started realizing they'd been hit. So it would be a terrible mistake if Iran retaliates. But that's not our goal. We are not declaring war on Iran. We're not looking for war on Iran. But if they attack us, then I think we have capabilities they haven't even seen yet. It would be a terrible mistake on their part. And frankly, it's not what we hope for or wish. What we want now is to ensure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. If what they want is a civil nuclear program where they have power plants like a lot of other countries in the world have, they can do that. That's the deal that's been offered to them. They rejected it. They played us. They tried to play us, I should say. They wouldn't respond to our offers. They disappeared for 10 days. And now, the president had to take action as a response.
Is that fair, what Secretary Rubio said there? We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear capabilities. We're not at war with Iran. I mean, typically, if you bomb a country, especially with all of those 30,000-pound bombs and a whole barrage of Tomahawk missiles, it's safe to assume you're at war. Can the U.S. honestly go in, bomb Iran, and then pull back and say, whoa, we're not at war here? Because it kind of seems like that's an act of war. Now, if they're content to leave it at that, and the Iranians are content to leave it at that, then I guess there's no war. But I have to think the Iranians are going to retaliate. And given that their defense capabilities have been severely degraded after 2 weeks of bombing by Israel, I don't know if a conventional attack on U.S. forces is in the cards. I have to think that this would come through terror groups, but that remains to be seen. That's pure speculation on my part, but it does give me another opportunity to point this out, and I like to do it every time I get the opportunity. If you see something, say something. Let me say that again. If you see something, say something. Anything that looks suspicious, something that seems out of the normal, could even be a gut feeling or a vibe. If you're anywhere, but mainly in big cities, I'm thinking in Canada, namely Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Halifax, Ottawa. If you see something, say something. Right now, we have to be on high alert for retaliation. And even though Canada, nearest I can tell, was in no way involved in this, we didn't even get a heads up that it was coming. We could be a target. We could be a target. And I don't want that to happen. This conflict is in Iran and Israel. And the U.S. interjected themselves into it. There is no Canada involvement there, and I want to keep it that way. I thought Donald Trump was crazy to go into Iran. Hearing some of these arguments, I admit I'm being swayed. I'm feeling a common sense movement here. And if the common sense angle is this, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Most countries agree on that. Since they won't stop trying to obtain a nuclear weapon, we will take out their facilities. That doesn't mean we're at war, but it means we're ready for a war if they decide that's not good on their end. Seems like it's up to Iran here, even though they did not ask for this conflict. They certainly didn't ask to be bombed or to have their nuclear facilities bombed. But the U.S. says it needed to be done, and they're claiming the world is a safer place. I guess that remains to be seen. Let's do just a little bit more of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
And the response included strategic ambiguity. Can you walk us through the plan in terms of how it was deceptive, not allowing the Iranians to understand what was really taking place?
Well, ultimately, when we do these things, it's because we care about the safety and security of our troops, of our airmen, and all those who are supporting these missions. So, obviously, the element of surprise is important in military tactics. In this particular, now, I don't think the Iranians or anyone should have been under any mystery. The president said very clearly, we have 60 days to make progress on a deal, and if we don't, I'm going to deal with it differently. But in terms of what people call deception and surprise and things of this nature, the core of that is not the success. The mission was going to be successful no matter what. The core of that was protecting our servicemen and women who are in harm's way and conducting that mission. That's the most important part. And they went in, they did what they needed to do with precision and skill that no other military in the world can do. And they left. And they were well outside of Iranian airspace before the regime even realized what had happened. And that was the goal here, and that was achieved. These planes came from halfway across the world, and no one saw them coming. And that's a huge credit to Pete Hegseth and General Kane and General Kurilla and obviously our commander-in-chief for pulling that off.
Well, the president said in a post recently that he knows where the supreme leader is hiding. But that he was not ready to take him out yet. What can you tell us about your expectations with regard to regime change in Iran?
Well, that's certainly not the goal of what we're working on here. The goal is stated very clearly in a letter the president sent the supreme leader about 67 days ago. And in a letter he said, you're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Let's negotiate peacefully a solution. We can make a really good deal that's good for Iran, good for America, good for the world. If you don't, however, then I'm going to have to deal with this differently. The Iranians didn't like the letter. They didn't respond to it. They ultimately entered into fake negotiations and tried to play him along. In essence, they thought they could do with President Trump what they've done with presidents in the past and get away with it. And they found out last night that they can't. And the world found out last night that you can't. And that's important, not just on this issue, but for so many other issues happening around the world. I think that what we are seeing is that this is a president that tells you what he's going to do, and then he does it. And I think that to a lot of people, including the Iranian regime, is shocking.
It's interesting that Secretary Rubio, and he's echoing what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had said, that the U.S. is not interested in regime change. They're not looking for new leadership in Iran. But then yesterday, President Trump sent out a truth on Truth Social, musing about maybe it is time for a regime change in Iran. Meanwhile, in Iran, it seems like there's somewhat of an uprising. I can't quite explain it because I'll be honest with you, I do not understand the geopolitics of the Middle East. I don't get it. It's centuries of history there, and for whatever reason, there's still a whole bunch of old vendettas that just continue to surface up in 2025. I don't understand it, but I do know there are people in Iran that are living in oppression. They feel like they don't have the freedoms that they're entitled to living there in Iran. And some of them would not be opposed to a regime change. In fact, some of them would welcome a regime change. Is that where we're at now, though? That's what I want to know. There's a couple more people I want to hear from on this episode of Scott Fox After 9. Again, this one is all about the U.S.'s attack on Iran this past Saturday night. Maybe you're wondering, Is this a Trump thing? Is Trump a warmongerer? Is Trump some guy that just wanted to start a conflict to create a distraction? Not necessarily. If Trump really did give an ultimatum to the Iranians and give them 60 days to respond, and the Iranians really did string him along, making him think they were making negotiating progress when really they had no intention of abandoning their nuclear weapons program, some might make the point that it was justified for the U.S. to lead that attack. Some may make the case that Donald Trump waited as long as he reasonably could before he had to take action. It's not just Donald Trump. Let's go to leading Democrat and former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. This is what Hillary said about it many, many, many years ago.
And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. Whatever stage of development they might be in their nuclear weapons program in the next 10 years, during which they might foolishly consider launching an attack on Israel, we would be able to totally obliterate them. That's a terrible thing to say, but those people who run Iran need to understand that, because that perhaps will deter them from doing something that would be reckless, foolish, and tragic.
I'll leave that there. So we know it's not a Democrat and Republican thing because Hillary Clinton, a leading Democrat, also said that she too was fully in favor of bombing Iran. Did the allies know? Turns out none of them did, and maybe this is part of the reason that this was able to be kept secret. They didn't even inform the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, who apparently is a great ally of America. They did not inform the Prime Minister. Listen to this.
On Tuesday morning, you said how important de-escalation was. This was at the G7. You told me you didn't think a US attack was imminent. You sat next to President Trump at the G7 dinner of leaders. You said nothing the president said suggests he's about to get involved in this conflict. On the contrary, here we are. He has struck Iran. He's done exactly the opposite of what you said you thought he was going to do. Do you feel foolish, frustrated that he's not listening?
Well, it's clearly a fast-moving situation, and there's been a huge amount of discussions in the days since the G7 ended, and the US has now taken the action to alleviate the threat that Iran's nuclear program poses. My position throughout has been as calling for de-escalation, to get people around the table to negotiate a better outcome diplomatically. And I've been talking to international leaders in recent days, but particularly intensely this morning. We'll continue to do so during the course of today.
And just final question, Prime Minister, what's your message to British citizens? Are you getting them out of the region now?
Well, for British citizens, we've been saying for some time to register their presence. And as far as Israel is concerned, just as soon as we can get charter flights off, we will do so. But I urge all citizens to make contact with the Foreign Office so that we can facilitate whatever support is needed.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you very much for your time.
That was UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on GB News. That is Great Britain News. Thank you very much to them for that clip. Again, I'm still trying to figure out where we're at here. The Allies were not involved in this. This was purely an American and Israeli operation, nearest I can tell. The U.S. was able to pull this off using all their own military assets. Since then, Israel has launched more missiles into Iran. Israel seems to be going after many, many different targets. The U.S. says they only went after 3 targets, none of them civilian, none of them even really military, just the labs where they were enriching uranium to try and make a bomb. I'm worried. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm worried. I asked you a few minutes ago, how are you feeling? How are you feeling now? This is a lot to take in. This is history unfolding right in front of us. How are you feeling? Because I'm nervous. I really think that war in the Middle East is possible. But I'm really afraid that there's going to be terror attacks here in the homeland, in the U.S. and in Canada. I'm very worried about it. Now let's go to the U.S. border czar, Tom Homan. This is partially him because he does have to deal with border issues. And there's going to be people that they're going to stop letting into America. There's going to be people that are going to get kicked out of America because of this. This is the guy that has to work hand in hand with the FBI and the CIA and the Department of Homeland Security to try and protect the homeland. He's also a very scary individual. Every time this guy talks, I listen. Tom Homan on the threats that may or may not exist against the homeland.
Can you assess that issue particularly? How many Iranians are in the country that are in sleeper cells trying to do bad to America right now?
Well, look, you and I have talked about this many times. I said the last 4 years, my biggest concern was this open border was the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. So I pulled numbers this morning just from a CBP under Joe Biden. There was 1,272 nationals of Iran released in the country between OFO and the Border Patrol. And you compare that to the Trump administration, zero. Right, zero releases. And right now, because of President Trump's leadership, we have the most secure border in my lifetime, most secure border in the history of this nation. So we have a secure border. That was President Trump's big win on securing this nation. So we're not releasing people in this country. Special interest aliens aren't crossing that border undetected. But under Joe Biden, we had over 10 million people cross that border. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking of women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, because they got away, because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis that Biden created that over 2 million people crossed the border and got away. That is my biggest concern, and that's what created the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen.
Wow. Holy cow. This is scary stuff. There's 2 million people in America, and they don't know where they are. Those are people that crossed illegally. They took advantage of the situation that was happening at the U.S. southern border. And I know that the rap is, well, these are usually migrants from South American countries, and they're probably fairly harmless. If they get caught, they'll be deported. Okay, well, I mean, it was known around the world that anybody could get into America. It was known that that was the fast track to get into America, is just to sneak in illegally over the southern border. Well, where are those people? And who are those people? Are they all South American migrants, or is it possible there were terrorists from other parts of the world that flew into Mexico or another South American country and simply walked into America? Is that what these sleeper cells are? Because that's what I'm really worried about right now. I'm glad no civilians were killed on Saturday. I'm glad the Americans did not take out any Iranian civilians. Good. We don't want to inflame this anymore. I really join in the calls that are coming from many, many, many leaders for de-escalation. Before this spirals completely out of control and we end up in World War III, I hope de-escalation wins. I hope the Iranians are willing to look at what happened and see how outgunned they were on Saturday and unprepared they were, and doesn't invite more of that for their people. I hope the Iranian regime says, you know what, we fought the good fight, but we're not doing this anymore. We can't keep doing this because there's not going to be much left of Iran if we continue to inflame this. But I'm also very conscious of the fact that Israel is very much involved in this as well. And I don't know that we have any say over what Israel does. They seem pretty hell-bent on creating a lot of damage and destruction in Iran. They want to take out the Iranian military. And I mean, they have their own reasons for wanting to do that. Again, I'm not an expert on the geopolitics of the Middle East, but I do understand that tensions between Israel and Iran are at an all-time high. And it's been years in the making that it came to this. Where do we go from here? All we can do here in Canada, nearest I can tell, is exactly what I said a few minutes ago. If you see something, say something. I'm very, very worried about our safety here. Because once these conflicts happen in foreign countries, it used to be it stayed over there. We didn't have to worry about it in Southern Ontario. This is something happening over in the Middle East. Well, if there are sleeper cells, if there are those here who would do harm on Canadians because of what the Americans did to Iran, I think that's deplorable. And that's all the more reason that we need to be extra vigilant right now until we get the all clear from the officials. If you see something, say something. Nothing too small. Something seems out of place, you got to call police right away, or whatever authority you think needs to be contacted in that case. We need to protect each other. We need to be vigilant. We need to make sure that we stay safe here as Canadians because, again, we didn't get involved in this. We didn't even know it was going to happen. I didn't want this to happen in the first place. But here we are. We now live in a world where Israel and America, kind of, are at war with Iran. Who's going to step up and support Iran? And do we want a conflict with them? That's one of the other things that I'm very, very worried about. Friends, thank you for listening to this episode of Scott Fox After 9. One last time before I go, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? I'm nervous. I'm hopeful that peace is going to prevail, but I'm also preparing for the worst. And that's why I really want to get that message out. If you see something, say something. We've all got to play a part in protecting our homeland and protecting our fellow Canadians, because I am afraid that this is going to get real nasty on the streets in North America. If you're anxious, talk to somebody. If you have questions, reach out to somebody. And again, if you see something, say something. Tomorrow, I will be back, and Anna is going to join me on the pod tomorrow. We'll do more of a regular episode. Again, today was really just about getting you all the information on why the attack happened, how they did it, and what happens next. It looks like regime change is still on the table. I don't know that the Iranians are just going to voluntarily go for that either. Pray for peace tonight. Take care of yourself and each other. This is not necessarily the end of the world by any means. This is not necessarily the beginning of World War III. I don't want anyone to get it twisted here. Right now, it's a fluid situation. It's something that deserves our attention. It's something that deserves a call for peace and de-escalation. But right now, I don't know that the threat is something that you need to lose a lot of sleep over. I don't know that you need to start building a bomb shelter in your backyard. We're not there yet. But if you tune into this pod every single day, my commitment to you is I'm going to give you what I know. I'm going to give you the latest relevant information in full context so you can make up your own mind about how you feel about this and every other issue that comes up on the pod. Friends, take care of yourselves and each other, and I will be back here with you tomorrow with a much lighter episode. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk tattoo removal and the My Apartment reunion, and I'm also going to announce my first vacation since I launched this Scott Fox After 9 podcast. No pods next week. First week of July, a lot of people are off. I'm going to be off too. We're going to talk about that. Have yourselves a great day, and thank you for downloading. I'll catch you right back here tomorrow. In the meantime, Pat James and the whole truth. Hey now. See you tomorrow.